Okay, as we're still talking Kickapoo, we talking about the outreaches that we tried to do. We tried in all of our ministry. We've tried to do everything we could possible in reaching out. We took groups to Indian Falls Creek for almost every year. We were at Kickapoo. We'd load up a group of our young people and take them down to the camp. And Indian Falls Creek is down near Davis, Oklahoma, about 100 miles south of Shawnee. And we had we used this is an all-Indian camp, or primarily, and it has become the largest Indian camp in the world. Back in the times when we were there, from Kickapoo, we had probably 25 kids that went down, and we stayed at the First Baptist Church, Buffalo, Oklahoma cabin for many, many years. And this was Deloris's home church, and they had a cabin built down there. At the it's in the Arbuckle Mountains, and it was strange. It was started by one of the early Indian missionaries, J.B. Rounds. He and a couple other fellows waded the Washita River and located this piece of property, and it was purchased. It's now owned and was owned then, of course, by the General Convention, the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma. But they saw this place and decided that this would be a place where they could get young people together and have a camp for them, and many people's lives have been changed. When we first began to attend down there, when we were at Kickapoo, we probably had 1,000, 1,200 from the Indian churches, and I worked on safety patrol. I taught mission study books or church training books every summer to young people. One of the times that I was teaching down there was they wanted me to teach the book Alcohol the Destroyer, and I bought me a pint of whiskey, and of course the kids really gave me fits over that. But one of the things we did in our class is that we took I had caught a snapping turtle and had taken its heart out and put it in a glass of water, and it had pumped for 2 days, still pumped for 2 days in that water. Well, the second day, I poured the water off of it and poured alcohol in, and it did a quick 3 beat and stopped. And I used this as an illustration of the alcohol problems, and and of course, working with our Indian people, alcohol was really a problem. And I poured out some on a board one day and lit it on fire, and it flamed up like I used gasoline. Of course, it was alcohol, and I had a lot of fun with that. And but when we got ready to leave, I couldn't find my bottle, and we hoped that somebody from the Buffalo Baptist Church didn't find it. And but anyway, we did a lot of that type of teaching, and I worked on the safety patrol, and we just had a lot of help from Indian Falls Creek. Now, Indian Falls Creek has grown to over 3,000. It's the largest Indian gathering in the world, and so it's very actively. It's got a lot of input in people's lives. Now, we also had Vacation Bible School every year, and at that time we did not have youth groups come in and help us, and but we still ran 30 or 40 children in Vacation Bible School. I'll remember my first Vacation Bible School as a pastor and as the superintendent of the Bible school. It was the first Bible school I had ever attended in my life. I'd never gone to Bible school when I was a kid, and it was, to say the least, an interesting experience. But we also had, we started, my major at OBU was religious education. Dr. Forbes Yarbrough was my counselor, and a part of his of my major work was to start and get what they called a 6-point Baptist church, where you had preaching and prayer meeting, WMU, Brotherhood, Royal Ambassadors, GAs, Sunday School, Training Union, all of these things, and we had them in one form or another during that entire time. But the one that really became the heartbeat for me was Royal Ambassadors. I directed Royal Ambassador camps at Leela, up by Ponca City, up by Pawnee, on the Pawnee Reservation. I had camps that had 125 boys in it, and just was pretty actively involved in Royal Ambassador work, and was throughout my ministry and all of my churches. I did not pastor a church that did not have a Royal Ambassador group, and Bob Banks, who became the director of Royal Ambassador for the state of Oklahoma, and later became the director of Royal Ambassador work for the Southern Baptist Convention for the Brotherhood, was a very close friend of mine, and we did a lot of things together and camps, and I served as camp pastor, camp missionary, and campcraft leader of many of his special groups over many, many years, and several churches that I was pastor of. These were all a part of Royal Ambassador work, and so we didn't have a whole lot of trouble keeping busy. Dr. Yarbrough allowed me to work in the different areas of church growth, and was a very, very dear friend of mine. So we did not use at that time mission groups. The groups that the people we did use was mostly OBU students that we could get to come out to work with us. At the end of, it was either 58 or 59, in the spring, I finally graduated from Oklahoma Baptist University, and was called as pastor for the Ponca City, the Ponca Indian Mission, and the Ponca Church. And the mission was in town, the church was out 4 or 5 miles out in the country. And so along in March, April, probably April, we moved to Ponca City. Out the Ponca Indian Mission had a parsonage, and so we moved into that parsonage, and by this time we had our 3 children. We had Barbara and Fred and Joel, and so the plan, as I worked this out with the whole mission board, the plan was to I could ride the train from Ponca City right straight through to Fort Worth, and I planned to work on my doctor's or on my seminary work there, and but wasn't able to do it the first year because of finances and on a new church field. And when we moved into the parsonage and moved into the church, we found that the church treasurer and the WMU treasurer were the same lady, and she kept her she kept the church money and the WMU money in a paper bag, and there was no account or accounting for where that money went. Whoever had a need, and especially if it was some of her relatives, then they would come to her, and she would dole out whatever help she thought they needed and whatever. And so one of the first things that I did was get the church to get a bank account and get the money put in the bank account, and that immediately created problems. We run probably 25, 30 people. Of course, the Ponca tribe is a relatively small tribe, and they have almost all of them are some kind of relative. And so when I did this thing with the finances, it really was like throwing gas on a fire, and didn't realize at the time what this was going to become. But there was also a missionary by the name of Bruce Conrad, and be his wife, that were missionaries to Chilocco Indian School north of Ponca City, about, 4 or 5 miles, something like that. And so because they were missionaries with the Home Mission Board, we fellowshiped together, and we went to Falls Creek together, and so we had a close friend there. And but as time went on, we did Vacation Bible School. We had Royal Ambassadors. We had GAs. Deloris was our church pianist, and she would go to, she was also WMU president. She'd go to WMU meetings, and none of the women would come. And so she got to sitting over at the church while she waited for nobody to come, and learned to play the piano. We spent a hard time there. It was there also during the summertime that our kids got themselves into trouble. Barbara was pulling Fred. Now, Barbara was probably 5 years old, and Fred was 4, and she was pulling him in the wagon, and they found a hornet's nest in a tree. And so the plan was that Barbara was going to run underneath the hornet's nest, and Fred was going to hit the hornet's nest with a stick, and Barbara was going to take him on and get him out safely. Well, they got the hornet's nest hit, and she dumped him out and jerking and running with the wagon. And it was exciting there for a few minutes. They got the hornets woke up, and but while we were there, we went to Indian Falls Creek, and we went to Leela, camp down by Pawnee, and we had a Royal Ambassador group. Henry Collins and Colin Snake were two of the boys that we reached for the Lord, and took them to camp many times. And it was we just never were able to get close to the people, and the main reason was my trying to get the finances taken care of. And but at the same time, we pastored the church out among the Poncas there. We also had an Indian mission, Ponca Indian Mission, in town. We had Sunday afternoon services and Thursday services. We had Sunday morning in Pine Ridge, or in Ponca, and then we had Wednesday nights at Ponca. And we had a clothing giveaway and in both places, and we just we tried everything that we could do. It was during this time that I gave up my coffee drinking. I would go visit in the homes in the evening because the men were working, and I would go into a home, and they had their coffee pot on the back of a wood stove all day long. And if it was it didn't make any difference. I needed to drink at least 2 cups at every visit, and if they got a little low, they'd add water to it, and if it needed, they'd add a few more grounds to it, and it was about the consistency of syrup. And I'd go home after 5 or 6 cups of this stuff, and my eyes would be 6 inches across. And so after I left Ponca, I no longer drank coffee, not even to be sociable. And that's one thing Ponca did for me. But we were there a year, and we'd gone on vacation just before school started, and we got back home, and we had a letter from the Home Mission Board that's saying that they had appointed us as missionaries to Hammond, Oklahoma, and I was not. That was the furthest thing from my mind. Deloris and I had spent our entire vacation back with her folks and my folks, and coming home, trying to figure what we were going to do to improve the work among the Poncas. And we to get this letter, I called Bailey Sewell, that was our director of Indian work in Oklahoma, and I was extremely angry. And he said, Harold, he said, the Home Mission Board tried to contact you, and you were gone on vacation. And so they were it would be another month before they met. So they wanted us to go ahead and act as if the appointment was final, and let you go out and check the field. And so he finally got me settled down enough to where that we agreed that I would go out with him, but I told him as soon as I got in the car that this was not what God had planned for me. And Deloris and I had agreed that we would pray about this, and we'd see. She'd pray, and I'd go look, and we'd see what direction God wanted us to go. And it's 300 miles out to where I met Bailey, and went on out to the Hammond Indian Mission. And I was just extremely discouraged with how this thing was going down. But when we drove over the hill and saw Hammond, the Lord impressed me that this is where He wanted me. And so we visited, met some of the people, and met some of the people out of the First Baptist Church that were supporting the mission work. Deloris and I, when we got back home, the Lord had done the same thing in her heart that He had done in mine. And I told her when I got out of the car, I said, honey, I said, I think God is in this. And so we resigned, and we went to Hammond, and of course that's another story. But the strange thing was that church never granted a letter for us. They refused to grant a letter for us. And because of that conflict over money, it just grew to such a situation that Eva, the gals who was president of the WMU, just never could live down. And her husband died while the last few months we were there, and she didn't even invite us to the wake. She invited the missionaries from up at Chilocco to come, and so we were only at Ponca City 1 year. We went to Indian Falls Creek. We tried to visit among the people, but was not a fruitful ministry as far as we were concerned. However, we reached Colin Snake and Henry Collins, and these two young men became fine Christians, and Henry was a mile runner in high school, and pretty fast. And we had he told me they were having a speaker come, and his name was Wes Santee, and I knew Wes Santee from my high school days because he had run for Ashland, Kansas, and Wes was coming to speak to the students there at the high school, and so I went up and heard Wes, and I'd worked for him and his dad when I was in the blacksmith shop at Ashland, and I introduced him to Henry, and he agreed to run a mile with Henry, and kind of give him some pointers and stuff. And Henry told me later, he said, Wes asked me, he said, how fast do you want to run this first quarter? And so Henry told him about 60 seconds. And he said when they finished it, that they had, and there was no time that either one of them had a stopwatch. But when they ran that mile, Henry had he had run it in exactly 60 seconds, and Wes had run so much that he knew within a second of what a time was. And just a thing out of my past that the Lord brought together there. And but we had a hard ministry there, never really accepted by the people, and but we grew up some there, and praise the Lord for that. So that brings us to Hammond, and we'll stop her here.